What's going on, guys? This is Josh. Welcome to Treksplained. Here I drink and do episode summaries and talk about Star Trek in general. Please like and subscribe after the video if you enjoy it. Now, without further ado, let me explain something to you. Today we're doing Season 2, Episode 3, called Minefield of Star Trek Enterprise. It starts off with Malcolm Reed walking into the mess hall and bypassing everyone else to go into the captain's mess. Malcolm rings the bell and awkwardly adjusts himself. He's clearly nervous, and then pushes the button to open the door and walks in. Captain Archer and Lieutenant Reed engage in some small talk before sitting down for breakfast. They're gonna have Eggs Benedict. They chit-chat a little bit, but Reed is awkward. He's not one to socialize all that much. Eventually they settle on just discussing work a little bit before T'Pol calls on the intercom and says they've reached a Minshara-class planet. In later Star Trek series it would be called M-class, but for Enterprise it's Minshara-class, from the Vulcan database. The Enterprise, NX-01, approaches the planet that was called on from the sensors. Archer and Reed arrive on the bridge, and T'Pol tells them a little bit about the planet. No civilizations to speak of, but there's some volcanoes. They talk about visiting the planet, taking shifts to go on shore leave, when suddenly there's an explosion. An exterior shot shows a big section of the hull being blasted away into space. And that's when the credits start. It's been a long road. After the credits, we're back on the bridge, and Archer calls out for a damage report. T'Pol calls for emergency medical assistance from sickbay because Hoshi got injured during that mine explosion. They talk about whatever caused the damage was not on sensors and it was not internal, so it's kind of a mystery as to what actually happened. Now in sickbay, Dr. Phlox is doing triage on all his patients, seeing where to put them, what to treat them with. Back on the bridge, Travis reports that something has just hit the ship, but there's no damage and nothing to be seen. They bring up the cameras for that section and start viewing it on the view screen. Eventually, something appears. It's a mine, and it looks like it was cloaked before. That solves the mystery of what happened on the other side. T'Pol reports that this new mine is right near an impulse reactor. Any damage to occur there, and it would cripple the Enterprise. Lieutenant Reed says someone has to go out there to disarm it, and he's the only one with the ordnance training. Archer agrees. Now, from a previous mission, they had these special sensors attached to their grappling arms. So they deploy them and begin scanning for any other cloaked mines. But at the moment, the sensors don't seem to be working. They were calibrated for Suliban cloaking devices, not this new species. In the armory, Malcolm gets dressed for a spacewalk, puts on his evac suit, and steps into the airlock and gets outside. Back on the bridge, T'Pol successfully determines which phase variance it is for these new mines. They appear on screen. Lieutenant Reed is now on the hull, right by the mine. He begins describing the mine to the bridge crew. There are spiky legs that have come out of the mine to attach itself to the Enterprise's hull, and it's pot-marked with micrometeorite impacts, so it's probably been in orbit for a while. He takes out a pad and begins scanning the mine. There's proximity sensors and a wide variety of other things, but he thinks he can disable it. The chief engineer, Trip Tucker, shows up and reports to Archer on the bridge about all the damage to the sections. But there's a little bit of good news. There's no deaths. They begin talking about a backup plan in case Reed doesn't succeed. They have to reroute a few things, but they could detach that section of hull plating, but it'll take a few hours. Archer says, "Get started." Back on the hull, Reed removes the panel, and the arming mechanism retracts onto the usable space. As he lets the panel float away, a ship decloaks. He reports it to the bridge, and the bridge says, "We see it." Now, timeline historically, this would be the first time they encounter this species. But this is a prequel series, so anyone who's seen the original series will recognize the shape of this vessel. It's a Romulan bird of prey. On the bridge, the Romulans are hailing the Enterprise, but the translation matrix cannot make out the language. The bridge calls down to Phlox in sickbay and asks if Hoshi can return to duty, but nah. Hoshi's messed up. T'Pol is trying her best with the translation matrix, but it's just not working. The Romulans charge weapons and fire a warning shot across the Enterprise. Little too close for comfort, though. Archer asks the navigator, Travis Mayweather, to navigate out of the minefield, but he says it's gonna be really tricky. The bridge calls Malcolm and says they're gonna try to get out of the minefield. Reed says he understands. Please don't go to warp. And Archer's like, I'll try to remember. They activate the beacon again, and the mines show up. All eyes are on Travis, and Travis begins sweating, but he successfully does it. The Romulan bird of prey recloaks as the Enterprise makes its way out of the minefield. As Travis negotiates his way out of the minefield, another spike on the mine on the hull extends from itself and stabs Malcolm right through the leg on its way into the hull. Malcolm screams out in terror. He recovers momentarily and reports to the bridge that he's stuck. Archer leaves the bridge and goes out to the rescue. He leaves T'Pol in charge and Trip to do the engineering stuff that Trip does. A brief scene in sickbay shows Hoshi wanting to get back to work, but Phlox telling her no. But he compromises and says he'll bring the comm logs down to her. Now on the hull, Archer approaches Reed and the mine and begins to get to work. Archer scans Reed's wound and says, "Looks okay, it didn't hit the bone and it doesn't seem to be bleeding too much." He begins trying to cut away, but Reed's like, hey, no, don't do that. That might trigger the explosion. Reed makes a dark humor joke about maybe having to amputate the leg, but if Chef got a hold of it, they'd just be serving roast Reed for lunch. He says he'll do with just a painkiller. Archer tells him briefly about the plan to detach the hull plating in the case of emergency, and Reed's like, yeah, it's a good idea. I'll sacrifice myself. Fuck it. Archer gives him a painkiller, and Reed smiles. The new plan, though, is to have Reed walk Archer through disarming the bomb. Because who needs ordnance training? Now in sickbay, T'Pol, Hoshi, and Trip are talking about the comm logs. Hoshi translates the first message, saying basically the aliens are trying to get us out of their system. The second message says that they've annexed this planet in the name of the Romulan Star Empire. The only person who knows what that is T'Pol. And it's sorta like, oh shit. Over the intercom, T'Pol, Archer, and Trip talk about the Romulan Star Empire. The Vulcan High Command has never made official contact with them, but they're rumored to be very aggressive. Archer and Reed continue to disarm the bomb, Archer doing the work while Reed reads off instructions. You know, Reed told Archer to pull it out by 1 centimeter. I swear this was about 10 centimeters. Archer makes small talk while talking about the instructions with Reed. Reed is like, what's up with the small talk? And Archer's like, helps me focus. But then Reed's like, doesn't help me focus. Archer's like, deal with it. Archer completes the first disarming sequence right as Travis Mayweather exits the minefield. The bridge calls Archer and reports that they've cleared the minefield. Archer and Reed begin the next deactivation sequence, and they small talk a little bit about why Reed didn't go into the Royal Navy like all of his family did. But the reason Reed didn't go into the Navy is because he has a fear of water. After some time beginning to disarm this device, Reed says they have another problem. He has to use the restroom. Archer says, just go in your suit. I won't tell anybody. And they have a good laugh. As they're laughing, 2 Romulan birds of prey decloak behind the Enterprise. But they can finally translate their language. They're able to respond, and they talk about how they know that the Enterprise can detach the hull plating. Just sacrifice those 2 people, and it'll be fine. Just do it. The Romulans basically say to fuck off. They're not going to tolerate espionage. Archer contacts the bridge and asks what's going on. T'Pol reports back. Archer completes the defusing procedure, but some sort of backup generator activates on the mine. The mine is rearming, but they're able to successfully reset the old control device. Unfortunately, they realize that their idea will not work. They would have to dismantle the whole mine in order to reach the backup generator. Seems like it's time for Plan B. Reed and Archer begin arguing about noble sacrifice, and eventually Reed just pulls the plug on his own air. Archer's like, what the fuck, man? And he goes over to Reed and plugs in his own air supply into Reed's helmet. Archer discusses his new plan with Trip and T'Pol back at the airlock. He's gonna need 2 shuttlecraft doors. Trip's like, what? Why? And Archer's like, just get 'em. Archer goes back onto the hull and brings the 2 doors with him, gives one to Reed and keeps one for himself, and then they detach the hull from the Enterprise. As it begins to float away, the two Romulans show up again, but they're not hailing, they're just charging weapons. Archer cuts the spike that's keeping Reed pinned to the hull, and they begin to push off and float away, right as the mine activates again. The mine explodes, and the shockwave pushes Malcolm and Reed further off into space. T'Pol tries to contact Captain Archer, but there's no response. Trip guesses that the blast might have knocked out their receivers. Travis Mayweather is able to see them on his scanners, and they open the cargo bay doors and align themselves to get Reed and Archer back inside. The Romulans are locking weapons though, and they're targeting the engines. The Enterprise successfully grabs Archer and Reed, and they warp out of the system. The Romulans disengage. Now in the cargo bay, Archer and Reed talk about how long it took for that mine to explode. Archer orders him to say it was 20 seconds. Dr. Phlox arrives with Trip and T'Pol and begins treating Malcolm's injuries. And that's the end of the episode. That's all for today's episode. Thanks for watching Treksplained. If you liked today's video, please drop a like and subscribe so you get updates on new videos. See you next time on Treksplained.